Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 251 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about people problems, but not only that, if you're having people problems, here are some things to keep in mind. That's what this episode is all about, because staying the course and working your way through these sort of problems can take persistence. It's hard work. And so this episode is for you if you're dealing with some people challenges. Let's get into the episode right now. Now, if you have people problems in your leadership role, then you're not alone. Almost everyone I coach has some sort of people challenge, either with a disruptive or poor performing team member, a difficult boss, or a challenging stakeholder. Now, people are the ones who get things done, but they can also get in the way of getting things done. So in this episode, I'm going to provide some reassuring thoughts for you that will hopefully help you to feel better about your situation if you're in the thick of managing a people problem. Now, this episode is all about reframing. Reframing is a useful tool to try to view things in a more positive light. And that's pretty much what this episode is all about. Reframing can reduce stress by recognizing distorted thinking. Now, in my experience of leading, coaching, and training, stress is one of the major factors that can derail our efforts to lead effectively. When we're stressed, we're more likely to be distracted and focused on our own needs, meaning we're looking inward instead of outward to our team members. A distracted and stressed leader is likely to be a less supportive and available leader. Okay, so when we're deep in the struggle of dealing with people problems, it can feel all-consuming. It might be time to take a step back and reflect on what's happening, and you can use these reassuring thoughts to help you do just that. And the first one is, the bad experiences stand out more than all the good ones. Now, the first thing to consider when you are battling a people problem is that bad experiences tend to stick with us more than the good ones do. This comes from our inherent negativity bias, which has been the subject of significant research. From an evolutionary perspective, which is discussed in an article From Idea to Value, which I'll put in the show notes page, this makes sense. Missing out on something good, such as food or water, wouldn't have delivered immediate consequences, but failing to be alert to negative events such as a predator may have involved a swift death. Now, of course, this doesn't apply so much these days because we're unlikely to meet death in our generally civilized workplaces. But it's worth keeping in mind that your frustration with people problems is likely to stand out more to you than any positive interactions you are having, and this can provide an unbalanced perspective which may have us believing that it's all going to custard, as a former colleague of mine liked to put it, and when in fact it might not be so disastrous after all. So what do we do about this? Well, we can try to put things back in balance. We can instead pay closer attention to the positive aspects of our team, the helpful, capable team member who supports you and the team, for example. We can also look for potential allies in these positive team members to help influence the rest of the team into more positive behaviours. And there's a related episode of this podcast, number 200, that I'd recommend you check out if you haven't already, How to Feel More Positive at Work. I'll put these in the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/251. The second thing to keep in mind if you're dealing with people problems is that it's probably not all about you. When we are beset by people problems, we have a tendency to take them personally. When someone is disrespectful to us or won't do what we say, we can start to view it as a personal attack. But in reality, this isn't likely to be true. And yes, you may be the target of the bad behaviour, but that doesn't make you the cause of it. So let's take a closer look. Now, if you've been reading my articles or listening to my other episodes, you will know that I like talking about the iceberg model of human behaviour, and yes, I'm going to mention it again. The iceberg metaphor tells us that the behaviour we see from people is only part of the story. What drives their behaviour lies beneath the surface and is not always visible to the naked eye. Now, at the tip of the iceberg, we can observe behaviours, body language, the general appearance of someone, what people say and how they say it. But beneath the waterline of our iceberg, there is much more going on. And I'll put a link in the show notes page to the iceberg model post so you can see the diagram for yourself. So underneath the waterline of our iceberg, we have things like cultural background, past experiences, mental and physical health, stress, motivation, skills, values, attitudes, emotions, education level, beliefs, fears, insecurities, life challenges, and the list goes on. And the thing to keep in mind is that most of what is at play is not always visible to us, and therefore, if that's the case, how could it be all about you? Let's look at an example that I have personally experienced, but I'm going to explain it using some made-up characters. Okay, Anthony is a colleague of yours. He went for the role of manager like you did, but you got it and he didn't, so now you're his boss. Since your promotion, Anthony has been difficult. He hasn't been putting in much effort and he's been disrespectful towards you, and it's pretty frustrating. Now, this situation can feel like a personal attack on you because you stood in Anthony's way for the promotion. But actually, you haven't really done anything wrong. You simply applied for the job. So could it be instead that there are other factors at play? So perhaps Anthony was banking on the promotion for extra cash to help with the payments for his new house. Perhaps Anthony feels ashamed about telling his partner that he didn't get the job. Maybe Anthony feels undervalued at work, or maybe he feels frustrated that he isn't where he wants to be in his career. So again, you could be the target of this behaviour, but that doesn't make it all about you, because all the things we just listed are things that are about him, not you. So keeping this in mind, you may be able to approach your people problems with compassion, empathy, and less fear and frustration. And the good thing about that is you might feel better during that time, and it actually might create a better result in the people that you're dealing with as well. The third thing to think about is that what you're doing might actually be working. So if you're experiencing friction or bad behavior as part of your people problem, you might actually be onto something, especially if you're trying to improve the team, hold people accountable when they weren't before, or to try to hit challenging targets. Sometimes when we see people acting out, it's a defense mechanism. And what do they want? They want you to go away and leave them alone. So what you're trying to do might actually be working, but it may be making people feel quite uncomfortable. Of course, we can't just smash changes into our team without considering the impact. We need to plan them and consult with people to make sure they have the knowledge and skills needed to make the shift. But just keep in mind that people problems can sometimes be a side effect of the improvement you're trying to make. So it actually might be a good idea to keep going with what you're doing. And there's a related episode, number 129, if your people are resistant to change, try these tips. Check that one out if you're trying to make change in your team and you're getting some friction. Okay, the fourth thing I want you to keep in mind when you're dealing with people problems is that if you're stressing about people problems, you might be one of the good leaders out there. If you find yourself lying awake at night pondering your people problems, you might be one of the leaders the world needs. Now, it kind of depends on how you're thinking about it. If you're thinking, how can I get them fired as soon as possible, that's not really what I'm talking about. But if you have good intentions for what you're doing, either for the team, the organization, or your people, then stressing about why your people aren't coming on board may be a sign that you care. And newsflash for you, some leaders don't give a crap about people unless those people help them get to where they want to go. Now, as a thoughtful leader reading this, I'd say you probably don't fall into that category. However, worrying excessively about people problems isn't helpful either, even if it might be a sign of a caring leader. Now, for some tips on what you might do to help with your worry, I'll link to a show notes page about worry tips for thoughtful leaders as well. That is thoughtfulleader.com/251. And just a note in here as well, if you're interested in potentially working with me on longer term coaching, I offer a complimentary coaching call to see whether we're a good fit to work together. So if you're interested, you can apply for that on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/251. Obviously, I can't coach everyone who applies, but if you don't get your application in, we'll never know. So hopefully you can get that in, and I might be talking to you soon. Now, number 5 here is an interesting one to keep in mind, is that to find what works, you'll need to experiment. And remember that experiments often fail. Now, when you're leading a team, we're constantly in the mode of trying to motivate people and help them to be their best. But it's not easy because everyone is different. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to get the best out of people. So as such, we need to experiment. We come up with a hypothesis of what might work for a team member and we try it. It might work, but it might not, so we try again. To solve your people problems, you might need to try lots of different things to help them improve or change their behaviour or find out the cause of what's really going on. So even though you may feel like you're failing now, it's actually just a part of the process. Thomas Edison is said to have failed 1,000 or more times in his pursuit of inventing the light bulb, and he got there in the end. So you'll get there too, so we really need to keep at it. And this goes for lots of things in people leadership as well, like motivation. There's lots of motivation theories I can tell you about, but just having a theory doesn't make it work for individuals. You have to try things and tweak things and see what might work for people. So once again, it's trial and error. You'll need to experiment, and experiments often fail, so keep at it. So people problems are never pleasant, but they are a natural part of leadership life. Well, at least until the robots take over. But then you'll still have problems with your robots from time to time as well. So in the meantime, reframe your people problems using these ideas that I covered earlier, and hopefully you can feel better about the role you are playing for your team and organization, even if it's not always pleasant. And just to recap on these things to keep in mind, the first one was the bad experiences will stand out more than the good ones, so you'll have a negativity bias, so make sure you are putting some positive stuff in there as well to remember. Number 2 is that it's probably not all about you, and we can reference the iceberg model of human behaviour to make that clear and to make it seem quite obvious actually that there's lots of things going on for other people and it might not be all your fault. Number 3 is that what you're doing might actually be working, because if you're ruffling feathers and trying to hold people accountable, they might be trying to make you go away and leave them alone, but actually, you might actually be onto something there. Number 4 was if you're stressing about people problems, you might be one of the good leaders out there. And number 5 was to find what works, you'll need to experiment, and experiments often fail, so just keep going. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you taking the time. Be sure to share it with a colleague who might need to hear it. And I'll be back with more in the next episode.